Hey, hey, hey. We're back. Y'all, we got one more week of this. We are back. We got one more week of going live about these teachings by Dr. Joe Dispenza. At any rate, if you're new here, I'm Renee. Hey, your manifesting mentor. I'm not a coach, I'm not a guru, but I'm a woman who walks the walk and who shares what works. And pause for a second because I got somebody that asked me, why do I use that disclaimer? Why do I find it so important to say that? And partly it's because I've been the way that I am in terms of being passionate about otherly otherworldly things like spirituality, not religiosity, but spirituality. I've been exposed to a lot of different teachings, and I come back to this one truth, which is oneness. But long story short, I've always been like the counselor type person, like helping people, listening to people, and being able to resonate with them and meet them where they are. And so people are always like, oh, you should be a life coach. Yeah, but no, right? Because part of it is because I don't have the capacity or insight to coach someone through something that I've never been through, other than understanding how to emotionally regulate, which is something that we all go through no matter what we go through, right? Um, Other than, learning how to show up and respond to certain things in life. So I guess I don't see myself as like a coach necessarily. I know coaches help cheer you on and make you feel empowered and that kind of thing. And I do feel like I do that. But I feel like I'm more of a mentor because I like to lead by example. I don't like to be telling people to do stuff that I'm not doing myself or holding myself to that same standard. So for me, I like to think of myself as a mentor, not a coach. I'm definitely not a guru. I'm the guru of my life. I'm the expert of my experience. And so are you. But I'm not your guru. And shout out to Tony Robbins for doing that documentary a few years ago. I think it pre-pandemic, called Not Your Guru. Really good if you get a chance to go watch it. But he kind of decentralized himself from the teachings of personal development and tried to get people to understand that you are your own guru. It's not me. I just happen to be teaching it. I'm the expert of my own experience, and I live by these principles that I share, and I help other people do the same. So that's why I call myself your manifesting mentor, not a coach, not a guru, but a woman who walks the walk and who shares what works. But enough of that. Tonight, we're diving into chapter 13 of Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And this chapter is titled Project Coherence, and it's all about making the world better or making a better world. Tomatoes, tomatoes. But this chapter is different. It's not just about individual change. We're not focused on individuals healing or manifesting anything in particular. It's all about collective energy, and it's measurable science, and it has a ripple effect of love. And I love this chapter so much because it brought up so much from my childhood. I did a video that I dropped from, I guess, earlier. What's today? Tuesday. I started on Monday. I did a video that I dropped talking about intercessory prayer, which is something that I learned growing up Christian Baptist. And I talked about how I had these mentors in my life that I looked up to, women who were elderly women or older women. I had a grandmother like figure named Miss Annie Smith. That's my lady to this day. Love her down. But she is someone I consider a prayer warrior because, baby, when she gets on the case, whatever your case may be, she is going to lay hands on you. She's going to pray not just for you but with you. And she has a supernatural ability that if you were doubting before you encountered her and her prayers, you become a believer instantaneously. And so I've had the privilege to have women like her, specifically her, in my life to pray not just for me but with me. And I know the power of prayer, and I know the power of intercessory prayer. And then again, growing up Christian Baptist, my grandmother would have prayer groups, prayer lines where they would call each other and they would pray together on the phone. There is a supernatural power that I believed in long before I came into any of these teachings. And I know to this day that they still work. But now I can appreciate how Dr. Joe teaches it from a scientific standpoint as to why and how it works, because it makes sense for my logical mind. My soul already knows, but it made sense for my logical mind to understand this. So, to get into this further, let's just hop into part one, which is the introduction, where Dr. Joe introduces Project Coherence and our ability to collectively come together and make an impact, not just in our individual lives, but in the world around us and the world, the planet. So, this section in part one, I went over the introduction, the history of peace gathering projects. And so, Dr. Joe opens this chapter by connecting the dots between ancient spiritual wisdom and modern research on group intention. So, he introduces the I think I'm saying that, Maharishi effect, where large groups of people meditating together were statistically shown to reduce violence, crime, and more in major cities. So, what's wild is that the data is not just woo woo, it's peer reviewed, right? It's been replicated multiple times and it's measurable. We have the statistics to show that when these people gathered together in groups and started meditating over a period of time, that in that time frame, crime rates went down, violence went down in the cities, and there were measurable changes. So we are introduced to the idea that the field responds when enough people are coherent. And I think Joe introduced this part in this part of his teachings or in the book, because number one, he practices coherence healings with groups of people at his workshops. These people collectively come together after meditating, after balancing their energy centers, and they come together with their elevated emotions, and they share a pure single intention, which is oftentimes to heal one particular person. But in that experience of healing someone, they ultimately feel the repercussions. They feel so much love. They feel freed from whatever was bogging them down. And in some cases, some people actually heal from things that they didn't even intend to heal from. They were just focused on healing someone else. And so I find this part of the chapter so fascinating, or book of the book, so fascinating. And it's one of the most inspiring chapters because, and especially because what's happening right now in the world today with all of these things that are capturing our attention and awareness in the headlines, we are up against a lot to continue to center ourselves and bring our attention and awareness back inward so that we can align ourselves and then go back into the world and be more coherent as we're dealing with day-to-day issues, dealing with people that we're familiar with in our lives, that we have dynamics and patterns with, right? That some of those patterns we want to change with these people. But as we're learning this work and we're dealing with ourselves every single day. Hey, Dana, welcome. As we're learning this work and we're doing so much inner work on ourselves, and then we're taking it out into our everyday lives, as Dr. Joe says, we should be taking our meditations with us. That's why he taught the walking meditation. Hey, Dana, what is this crown thing? I'm so new to streaming that I appreciate the crown, and welcome. And I'm so glad you're here. Dana, how did you find my channel, by the way? I'm just curious to know because I always like to know how people learn about my live streams and my playlist. But yeah, so I'm just thrilled that Dr. Joe introduces this part of the book, because we are bombarded by so much in our news headlines, and it's easy to become cynical in a world like today. And as we're learning this work, we know that we are not helpless, because if we're seeing miraculous changes in our inner state, just in our personal lives, and we're going into our workspaces and we're going into the places that we frequent, and we're seeing how differently we can show up and how that is cultivating change, then we start to understand that this is not limited to just our world and our everyday lives, but it's expansive, and more people that you can connect to that's doing this work, we have influence. And Dr. Joe does this with his Walk for the World. If I don't know if you're familiar with Walk for the World, which is he does this periodical walk with hundreds of thousands of people across the globe on a particular day, and he does it to get people to come together and share pure intentions of love and elevated frequency across the planet. And Dana said, I stumbled on your videos a week ago on a short and I subscribed. Love your content. Sent you a few messages. Okay, Dana. Well, I'm so glad you found my short on short is on YouTube. Yep. I'm so glad you found my short. And where are you sending me messages? Because I don't necessarily I know on TikTok, I don't really check messages. I've gotten a lot of weird messages on TikTok. But if you comment something, I'm more than likely to respond then. TikTok is a different space for me. I'm still learning to navigate that, but I'm so glad you found me, though. I'm so glad you found me. And I appreciate that my content resonates. That's why I show up. That's why I show up. So we can do this work together. Remember, I'm not a coach or a guru. I'm just walking the walk so I can help other people walk the walk with me. Yeah. So welcome. Um, but yeah, like Dr. Joe, man, what he's doing with Walk for the World is incredible. Um, you sent a comment, Dana. Okay, well, now that I'm unofficially meeting you here, comment again and tell me your name because I don't know if you have the same name on this platform or wherever. Comment again, and I'll respond to your comment. I tend to write back. I'm sorry about that. Um, so yeah, I'm so proud of Dr. Joe, and I participated in Walk for the World multiple times, and I could feel the shift in me because it gives me a good sense of feeling like I'm contributing in some way. Because a lot of times you feel helpless, and you know, I feel like everybody in this world, we are the divine expressed in the form of the infinite, right? We have infinite personalities, infinite perspectives, infinite ways of thinking and being, and so on and so forth. And so when you think about the concept of the divine expressing itself through the infinite, we are one of the infinite. So we are here because the divine um it's all good, Dana. You're not really interrupting me. I like to talk back as long as it makes sense. But we are one of the infinite that the divine decided to incarnate in this life. So we play a role and we matter, right? So the fact that Dr. Joe is giving us this information in a way that is tangible, right? It's not convoluted with religiosity. It's not convoluted with things that are, for some people they say woo woo. A lot of people are turned off by woo woo, you know, and that's cool. I'm drawn to it because I'm woo woo ish, but I'm also very analytical, and so science appeals to me as well, and that's why I can appreciate the teachings of Joe. But I love how this particular chapter is helping us understand that we are not separate from one another, and in fact, he's bringing so much of that science, and I'm going to continue into this 3-part breakdown of chapter 13 to see how he's bringing that science, but it's very tangible, right? So the work that I do in meditation to regulate my nervous system so that I can show up better in my everyday life has rippling effects, right? Not only do I get to show up better in my everyday life, everybody connected to me gets the benefit from my showing up better. My relationships can improve. The level of clarity that I have as I'm making decisions improves. Overall, my health improves because I'm not living in a chronic state of fight or flight, like he talks about. I'm not allowing that chemistry in my body from those stress or more emotions to pump cortisol and adrenaline unnecessarily into my body so that it wreaks havoc on my overall immune system. I'm not doing that anymore. So everything in my internal world benefits, everything in my external world benefits, and now take that and multiply that multiple times over when I connect with other people who are doing this work for themselves, and we connect together for a collective intention to be set. We want to see more peace on the earth. And we know that we'd be very hypocritical to say, I want more peace on earth, but yet I'm mean to my neighbor, because I forget that that's also a role that I'm playing in my everyday life, contributing to someone else's, suffering or sadness if I'm not being kind, right? Like the world is one great big mirror, and Neville teaches this through law of assumption, and Joe teaches this in his own way through, just teaching us about coherence and all of that. And Abraham does too. Like, as you see people, people are meeting you based on the frequency you're putting out. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us to have basic divine accountability, for us to understand that we do play a role and we can play a role. And it's not about being perfect. You are already perfect, even in your learning and growing and expansion, right? Like, even in your flaws, even in your mistakes, it's perfect. It's all there to teach you. Earth is one great big school, and we're all here to learn. And that's why I don't knock how people choose to move in their lives. I just don't want them to knock me for choosing how I want to move in my life. Like, I love Neville too. Like, and Neville, speaking of Neville, he's one of the main ones that tell us to lift others on high. Do unto others, which is the golden rule. Neville always taught the law of assumption from the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And he said, if you wouldn't want someone to imagine you suffering, or you in sickness, or you broke and no money and not able to pay your bills and take care of your kids and family, then don't imagine it for other people. And as a matter of fact, he tells you to lift them on high, to lift them in your imagination out of those circumstances where they are hopeless and helpless, and see them. And he literally introduced inner conversations as a method, as you're imagining, to hear them tell you, instead of the bad news they might be telling you, I lost my job, my marriage is over, I'm sick, or whatever the case may be. Hear them tell you, I've never felt better, I've never been better, I have so much, so many good things have happened to me. Let me tell you that story, right? And it seems like a simple gesture, but I've tried this for myself, and I will say I've seen changes in people that I actually know. After hearing them tell me something negative, their situation turn around. And Neville says you ain't even got to tell them what you're doing in imagination. Just do it with pure intentions. And then trust and believe that that assumption will harden into fact. And when I would find myself doing that, I was able to see that person's story turn around. Now, you might say, well, how do you know that had anything to do with you? It may not have, but you know what? It behooves me to believe that I have some kind of influence over other people. And now that I'm learning the science of what kind of influence we have over each other, it's easier for me to believe that I can see others in a better situation than what they're currently in. And that does influence, because as we're learning now, we are all swimming, not literally, but we're all swimming in the same invisible unified field of consciousness. That's what connects every single one of us. If you're understanding what the unified field is, then you are understanding that we are all walking and talking and interacting in this, consider it like an invisible ocean of energy and frequency. And we're all representing the infinite within that ocean. And whatever we're tuned into, we get to meet the match to that frequency in different ways, through different circumstances, experiences, people, dynamics. And so it's all one consciousness being expressed in infinite ways. And you get to tune into what you prefer to experience. This is why imagination creates, because you feel into your imaginative scenes. You're imagining 24/7 in your life anyway. That's how we experience this life. In a non-local way, I might be sitting here on my live stream, but I might be thinking about 10 other things I have to do, other places I have to go, and I could literally see myself doing those things. That's using my imagination. Why not use it for more lovely things, as Neville teaches? And that's what this chapter is really all about. So before I continue to ramble, another person asked, did I read that part? Yeah. Another person asked, how is coherence defined in this chapter? Coherence is when your heart and brain are in a harmonious rhythm, generating a measurable electromagnetic field, as Dr. Joe says, because as you're breathing into this heart center where your attention goes, your energy flows. So you're breathing into the heart center, your attention and awareness is here. As you're breathing into it, that energy there is being amplified, it's growing, it's swelling. Think of it as swelling, right? That signature affects your own health. It also affects the collective field. Again, anything and everyone that's connected to you, they get to benefit from your alignment, from your coherence. Someone else says, Is this the same as group prayer? I'm going to assume you're talking about coherence, intercessory prayer. I would say yes and no. It's the same principle, right? When two or more people are aligned, and this is what happens at Dr. Joe's workshops. It's also what happened when I was growing up Christian Baptist in the church, when people would be in a state of prayer, or as they described it, as when they would be in the spirit, right? Meaning you drop all your guards, your identification with problems and circumstances, and you're just basking in the beauty of being alive. And you're grateful for everything, and you're grateful for love, right? That is very similar to me as being in coherence, as Dr. Joe explains it scientifically. So yes, it's very similar in principle, but Dr. Joe brings that science into it, and it's intercessory, like consider it intercessory prayer but backed by data, right? So when two or more gather in coherence, that's the scientific term, or in the spirit if you're Christian Baptist like I grew up, the field begins to amplify, the love swells, the pure intentions are bigger than if it were just one person holding it. And that's really what that means. So it is similar to group prayer, but when you add the science to it, there's no room or no need for you to even doubt that it's actually effective. I mean, think about it. We trust our doctors with our lives. If we get in an accident or something, we're going to go to the hospital, and we're going to trust those people with our lives to give us whatever kind of surgery or whatever, because of the science, right? So for me, it's like, if the data's there, I don't need to doubt. I think what Dr. Joe says is, a lot of times, once you can convince your analytical thinking brain that there's a possibility that this is true, the other part of the hurdle becomes, do you believe it's true for you? And that's where the inner work really comes in, because now you got to shed all those limiting beliefs about yourself and what you think is possible for you, for whatever reason. The stories don't matter. The bottom line is, what is your concept of yourself? Who do you say you are? Do you believe you're worthy? And if not, that's the work. You got to get to that state of worthiness, knowing that you're worthy just because you are, not because you have to perform or do anything to become worthy. But if any of this resonates with you, leave some comments in the comment section so I don't feel like I'm having a monologue, y'all. But I see Dana's been saying yes, yes, yes. You're resonating with a lot of this, Dana. I'm glad I'm hitting home for you, sis. Um, but yeah, so part two is where Dr. Joe takes it a step further by explaining the relationship between us and the earth. Solar cycles and Schumann resonance is what he talks about. So he expands our awareness beyond just our bodies and into the planet itself. He talks about how solar activity affects the earth's electromagnetic field, and how we are sensitive to those fluctuations. Now, if you are someone who's into astrology, I've never really been into astrology. There are a lot of people who are in the spiritual community who are, and they really truly believe in this, that when there's a full moon, they call it full moon meditations. They have all these different things and rituals that they do, because they talk about how certain solar um, activities influence our manifestations. And so he he basically breaks down how that's a thing and why that's a thing, with science, with a lot of data from our universe at large. And so one of the things that he talks about is Schumann's resonance, or Schumann resonance, which is like the earth's heartbeat. He says it's when we're in coherence we can tune into it. So when our brain and hearts are in alignment, and that energy is being amplified from our heart center and influencing the brain, our brains resonate. I think it's 7.83 hertz. And he says that resonance is the exact same frequency of the core of the earth. So he's saying that research shows that global coherence spikes when large groups are synchronized in meditation. And this again is related back to the peace gathering projects that Dr. Joe talks about a lot in this section as well. So in essence, when multiple, or as the biblical scripture says, when two or more gather in my name, which we found that to translate into when two or more gather in coherence, right? And also with the shared intention, whatsoever they ask, my Father in heaven answers, right? So when you share an intention and that those emotions are elevated and you are pure in your intentions and you are more knowing than hoping, right? And you begin to intend for whatever that intention is with others who are sharing that same intention, coherence is now spiked and there is a synchronization that happens. And this is what Dr. Joe says, it's proof that we're not separate from nature, because that synchronization isn't just the intentions being answered, it's also we're resonating with the core of the earth and nature starts to respond. It's how people who have a green thumb, who are really good with plants, they understand this without understanding the science necessarily, but they understand this when they speak lovingly and kind words as they're nurturing the plants tend to thrive because they're coming from that heart center, their heart space. And also, similarly, I brought up the fact that when we were in the pandemic during 2020 lockdown, humans, a lot of us, we were able to finally take a breather and breathe from the day-to-day hustle and bustle and the stresses of life. And I'm not saying people didn't have any problems, they did. You know, a lot of people took the pandemic really hard, but in essence, collectively, nature started to thrive when we sat our butts down and we were in the house. I don't know if y'all saw the footage from different I saw in my local news, I live near the Everglades, and I saw how the swamp land and just nature was thriving when we were in the house, because a lot of people were able to be more centered and coherent and grounded and be surrounded by their loved ones and spend time, which if they were used to being stressed out from their day-to-day experiences and now they finally got to take a breath and enjoy just being, that changed things in their environment, not just with the people around them, but even in their neighborhoods. Like things shifted. And so this is basically what Dr. Joe is explaining. Like we have way more influence over our day-to-day experiences, not just for our manifestations, but also for influencing the planet, for influencing things, especially the things that are in the headlines today. Please don't think it's small that just because you are not outside protesting, that you're not benefiting the whole by doing your own inner work. Because in essence, you really, truly are. You are. And I had to accept this for myself as well, because it's like, well, there's so much I want to do, so much that I want to say. But I feel like I'm in my strongest state of being when I'm sharing my natural gifts. And this is one of them. I'm a communicator by trade, but also by nature. And I've always been like a teacher type person. And it's shown itself in many ways, no matter what title I've worn as a job. Um, and I do it when no one's looking, without applause, without an audience, without a camera in front of me. And I will do this when no one's looking for the rest of my life. But now I have a channel. And now I get to share my gifts. And now I get to share my personal growth in ways that others can benefit from. And I think that's so useful, way more useful than we thought. Thanks to Dr. Joe and, of course, all the other teachers that I talk about. Someone says, why does solar activity matter in healing or manifestation? And I would say, as Dr. Joe explained it, solar energy influences the electromagnetic environment. You know, obviously, without the sun, we couldn't exist here on this planet, but we need solar energy, not just for, living, like plants thriving and us being able to breathe from the plants and have oxygen and all that. But also, he says high coherence during solar peaks can amplify healing and intention in the field. So, again, when you're with another who's sharing that intention with you and they are also in coherence, it amplifies that. And this is why when Jesus said, when two or more come together in my Father's name, in coherence, my Father in heaven answers, right? Like whatever you ask, it will be given. He's going to answer your prayers. The divine is you're sending out a very clear intention with that elevated emotion. I sound like Joe. I've been reading a lot of his stuff and listening and learning. But yeah, so question number 2, someone says, can we physically feel the Schumann resonance? Ah, so many people in Joe's community have reported um, feeling emotional or energetic shifts. So for me, if when you talk about feeling the Schumann resonance, again, the Schumann resonance is the same as brain and heart coherence. So yes, emotionally and energetically, you'll feel the shift when you're no longer in fight or flight, and you can just rest in fulfillment, trust, feel wholeness in your body. That to me is feeling the Schumann resonance, the core of the earth's heartbeat, when you have that within yourself. So the more aware and coherent you are, the more you sync with these rhythms of the earth. And so we're going to dive into part 3. I'm not going to hold you with my rambles, even though I have fun with it. Dr. Joe talks about the concept of emergence. And this is one of my favorite sections because Dr. Joe introduces the idea of emergence and the phenomenon that where the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. So he says a group of people meditating together doesn't just equal 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. He says it creates something entirely new. The energy field gets stronger, more ordered, and the quantum potential expands. This is where individual intention becomes collective impact. And it just drives home further everything that we've been talking about so far in chapter 13. And that is when we come together as individuals who are doing the inner work to learn how to become more coherent, we amplify that coherence with our collectiveness as we come together with divine coherence. Multiple people being coherent at the same time has way more influence than just one person being coherent. Although he also says one coherent person in the room of a bunch of incoherent people is more powerful than the incoherent people, which I thought was fascinating too. But again, this is where individual intention becomes collective impact. So someone asked for this section, can we create this emergence? Oh no. Someone asked from this section, what exactly does Dr. Joe mean by emergence, and why is it so important, or why is it so powerful in group settings? So emergence is when the energy of the group becomes greater than the sum of its parts. So as I was saying, more people being in coherence is super powerful as you join the group of others who are in coherence, right? It's not you just meditating beside others, it's a shared field being generated that's exceptionally more coherent and powerful. And this creates a super organized effect in the quantum field, right? He says that it allows for breakthroughs and even spontaneous healings that would not happen with just one person alone. And so this is why he does those coherent healings in group settings. I know I came into understanding Dr. Joe's coherent healings maybe in 2021. And I actually did one for myself at the time because I was experiencing some things in my body that I really didn't understand, and I wanted to be freed from it. And when I did, it was about 12 people that I did not know. Obviously, it was virtual because we were all still kind of on lockdown and couldn't see each other in person. But it was about 12 people I didn't know. I had to submit a photo of myself when I was well, right? And I had to let them know what I was intending for. And so basically, Dr. Joe trains these people to bless their energy centers, get into coherence and elevated emotion. And what happens is I'm listening to a meditation as they are actually meditating, and I'm just laying there. They expect me to not really do anything but lay there, but also to, if I did do anything, just make sure that I'm not focused on worryation or fear, that I'm trying to tune into my energy centers as well to elevate my frequency. But from there, these 12 people are sharing an intention for me to be well and sending, in essence, sending their energy to me, amplifying my intentions as well. And so that's how this really works. And he says, when this happens, no one person is leading. We're all leading at the same time. So don't think of it as like, or you could think of it as like a group, a flock of birds flying. In essence, it looks like one may be the leader because they're cutting the air, in the front of the pack, but they're all leading if you pay attention. So Joe says emergence is similar to that when we're thinking of meditating or we're having intercessory prayer with other people. The sum of the whole is way more powerful than the parts, right? And so that's what this is all about, really. I hope that made sense. Someone else says, what does this mean for people who feel powerless in today's world? I actually just talked about that. I talked about that. It means you're not powerless at all. You're connected to a field that responds to your frequency. And we're learning this, y'all. Like, we're not just practicing this for individual meditations. Obviously, you want to master it for that, because the better your life is, as Reverend Ike would say, the best way to help the poor is to not be one of them. And he said that because it's true. If we're all poor, it's kind of hard to help each other out of poverty. But if one or more of us become wealthy, it's easier to help people who are less fortunate than you when you make something of yourself, when you master something. So of course, get the information, make your life better, but understand that you can expand that beyond yourself. And you aren't powerless. You can do things, have pure intentions, lift others on high in imagination, in your assumptions. Right now we're very divided in where I am in the States, and according to party and all this separation, right? And we're feeding into the headlines and giving it our power and attention and emotion. And we don't have to, right? We can assume better things of other people. One of my greatest assumptions that I hold to this day is that any and everybody can change, and redemption is for everyone. I have to say that again. Any and everyone can change, and redemption is for everyone. So nobody is not exempt from the fact that you can change. You can change. Now whether or not you choose to is a different subject, right? But in essence, we all can. We have the ability to make that choice. And then also, if I can change, who who am I to hold someone to their old self only, to say that they can only be what they've been? Who am I? Right? Like, we like to cling to religion to justify that judgment, to justify those ways of like condemnation, of being the one to condemn. We love to cling to religion for that, but man is really personified God in his likeness. God don't judge. That's man. That's a very humanistic trait. And we have to understand that we can separate ourselves from that. Redemption is for anybody. Anybody can change, and anybody can turn a new leaf. It's possible, right? I'm not saying it's fact and it has to be that way, or they don't have the ability to choose otherwise. They do. That's free will. But in essence, they can. And if I leave that room for possibility, then I can assume the best beyond what I see and experience with my five senses. I can assume the best. I can assume, or and if not the best, I can at least assume better, right? I can assume that what I see in front of me, if life itself is temporary, I can assume that any and every experience in this life is temporary, as it is. Um, but I can assume that this too shall pass, that this can change. It can change. That's possibility, y'all. We got to leave room for the unknown and leave room for possibility. Otherwise, why are we practicing this? Why are we here? Why? Why did these teachings come about? Because the divine wanted us to know that what we've experienced is just one of the infinite. If you want to talk about it from scientific perspective, in the quantum field, the unified field, infinite potentials exist. And all you need to do is tune into one of them to collapse it into matter. So, yeah, believe in possibility, believe in any and everybody in every circumstance's ability to be changed, to be different. Assume the best, lift others on high. That's how you do this work, because you're connected to a field that responds to your frequency. And in essence, healing the planet begins by healing your heart. And that's why we do this work. That's why we learn about law of assumption. And we really look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what have my assumptions truly been? Because if you do that work, that work is very sobering. It's very sobering because it's easy to fall into victimhood. It's easy to believe that life is happening to you, that you are the victim of someone else's behavior, that they're doing something to you, that this system is screwing us all over. I'm not saying that a lot of that is doesn't have legs. All of it could be justified. I could find reasoning for every single argument under the sun, including everything I just said. And I probably felt those emotions and those thoughts at some point in my experience. But I also have to be understanding that if I can assume that, then I can assume something else too. And if imagination hardens into fact, or if my intention, if repeated over time, collapses into material matter, physicality, and experience, then I can hold myself accountable for what I'm assuming and how I'm allowing those assumptions to paint a lens over my experience and influence how I behave, how I emotionally relate to my life and the people in it. I could take divine accountability for that. And it's not for the sake of blaming, right? Cuz some people have a hard time with these teachings and they fall into that space where they feel like it's about blaming yourself. It's not about blaming yourself. Your soul came here to evolve in a particular way. And the hand we're all dealt, we don't get to control that intellectually, but apparently soul contract wise, we chose it in order for our souls to evolve. So every teacher is meeting us where we are that we get the lessons. And if you get the lessons, you start to learn that some of that sheds away. Some of those patterns, those loops, those pendulums, they start to shed. And then we move to higher levels of awareness and we have, different experiences from there. But again, I could go on and on and on and on and on and ramble like I tend to do. But I won't hold you. It's Tuesday night. I'm glad you showed up. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. And I love that for you. I love that for me. But if this stirs something in you, we're just getting started because tomorrow I'll be uploading parts 4 and 5, where we dive deeper into how coherence is built and how you can start contributing to the collective field today. So, this Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, I'll be going live again to cover those parts and talk about how to become a living blessing on the planet. Somebody who just goes around with just good intentions, somebody who lifts others on high because you can, not because you have to, because it's all a choice, but because you just feel like what Dr. Joe says, you do this work and you start to feel into your wholeness again. When a person feels whole, all they can think about is giving because they want other people to experience what they feel, right? Just like if they say misery loves company, well, the opposite is also true. Wholeness loves company. And when you feel whole and complete, you want to give. And so you start to understand that I could be a living blessing to others, not by overextending myself in the physical way, in the physical realm, or even energetically. But what if I have enough energy, I know how to replenish, I know how to fill my cup back up. Then whatever runs over, whatever runneth over, I can share. And that is a blessing to the planet. So until then, we're going to revisit parts 1 through 3 on my YouTube playlist. That's linked in my profiles here on my YouTube channel and also on my TikTok bio. Your energy matters, your love matters. And together, we, you and I, are the field. We're not separate. That's it. That's all. That's all I got, y'all. And until next time, I'll see you next time. Bye.